You all know Magdalena is an assistant professor in the Department of Epidemiology at the Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia University. And very briefly, she did her undergraduate work at Cornell, got an MPH at Yale, got a DRPH at Harvard, did some other amazing things, including an RWJ Health and Society Fellowship at the University of Michigan. And here she is.
Great, thank you so much. Should I use this
So here's how this works. The toggles on the left-hand side will give you forward and
Okay.
back.
Okay.
Do we know if anybody's watching from Davis? Or?
Nobody is watching. That's only a recording.
I got you.
Yep.
Okay. So thank you so much for coming today. I'm going to be talking about one area of my work, which is neighborhood influences on violence, and I'm particularly interested in research on neighborhoods that actually can lead to interventions and that can inform interventions. So there's been a proliferation of research on neighborhoods and violence in the past 15 years. As you can see from these and many other papers that have been produced, and it's really been focused on observational studies, looking at how neighborhoods may influence different types of violent outcomes. The question is, given this bulk of observational research, where are we headed next? Where is the research on neighborhoods and violence headed? And so I think there's two areas where I think we can make an important impact. I think one is that given the bulk of observational research, it's time to shift from observation to action. That is, figuring out, going from studying how neighborhoods influence violence to how can we intervene on neighborhoods to reduce violence. And second, and related to the first, it's important to identify intervention targets that we can use, that we can intervene on to improve population health, reduce violence, and also reduce disparities in violence. And my focus is particularly on reducing racial disparities in violence. So building on these two directions, we have focused on research that can lead to intervention, that can inform intervention. And there are two areas that I think we can do work that leads to intervention. And I'm going to be talking about one example in each of these areas of work that I've done. So first is, I think we can use natural experiments to learn how we can reduce violence by intervening on neighborhoods. And the second area is that I think in order to inform community trials, we have an exciting opportunity to simulate intervention targets to reduce disparities in violence. And so I'm going to be talking about each of these areas in turn. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about natural experiments and how we can learn how to reduce violence. And particularly focusing here on transforming neighborhoods as a way to reduce violence. So with natural experiments, the great thing about natural experiments is that we can learn from real circumstances. The treatment occurs in the neighborhood, so it actually helps us answer an appropriate question, which is what happens if you intervene on neighborhoods. Because the treatment is at the neighborhood level, it's actually exogenous to the resident population, and in that way we can sort out what's due to the neighborhood from what's due to the people who live in the neighborhood, and get at a better causal effect of intervention at the neighborhood level. It also, because we're evaluating real interventions, it actually provides evidence that is of direct public health value. That is, we can learn from natural experiments what actually would work, what could work in other settings. And in addition, I think it helps us evaluate the impact that non-health structural interventions and policies can have on health. And I think particularly when doing research on neighborhoods, we've learned that a lot of times there's non-traditional health interventions actually have a great impact, could have a potential great impact on health. And so if we want to intervene on neighborhoods, it's not really going to be the public health sector that's going to do that, but it's working with other sectors. So as an example of the value of this type of work, I'm going to be talking about one particular study that we did. So this study builds on years of research that I've been doing in the city of Medellin in Colombia. This is the second largest city. It's the industrial center of the country. It has known a long history of violence, particularly related to drugs. And so what was interesting is that what happened is, so if you see a map here of the city of Medellin, and the darker areas are areas with more concentrated poverty, lighter areas, less concentrated poverty. So you can see there's a lot of residential segregation by income in this city. And I was interested in seeing, well, how can we intervene in these poorest neighborhoods in the northeast section of the city to reduce these rates of violence? And while I was doing some of my dissertation work there, it so happened that there was this innovation built by the municipality. The municipality decided to build urban gondolas to connect these neighborhoods in the northeast section, in the mountainous periphery of the city, to the city center, to the metro line that runs across the city center. So this is a photo of the urban gondola, so you can see it's kind of like a ski lift. Connecting these neighborhoods that are the poorest, physically isolated from the rest of the city, and the most violent neighborhoods. But to me, interested in neighborhoods, what was interesting was not so much the urban gondola in itself, but what happened around it. So around all the gondola stations, the municipality decided to invest in the neighborhoods. They built public spaces, so parks around the gondola stations. They improved the lighting in the neighborhoods. They invested in family police stations. And just walking around there, I noticed that there was a proliferation of small businesses around these areas. So I hypothesized that such an investment in urban renewal, particularly the availability of police, the growth of small businesses, and the availability of safe public spaces could contribute to a reduction in violence. And I wanted to test that. So in order to do so, to test the impact that this intervention had on violence, what we did is we did a pre-post intervention control design. So what happened is that luckily we had pre-intervention data on all the neighborhoods in the city of Medellin, and on the residents of the neighborhoods. So what we did is we selected our survey participants who lived in the intervention neighborhoods, and we used propensity score matching to match them to a set of comparable control neighborhoods. That is comparable on homicide, on pre-intervention levels of homicide, on social class, on economic characteristics. And we had pre-intervention data on about 600 people living in the intervention and control neighborhoods, as well as data on their neighborhoods. Then the gondola was built in 2004, and then we followed up the same people in 2008. So we were able to get data on about 470 people who we had both pre- and post-intervention data on in terms of the intervention and control group. And so what did we find? We wanted to see, well, do the intervention neighborhoods, did they experience a greater decrease in violence over time than the matched control neighborhoods? And so what you see here is a decline in